All right, let's dive into this absolutely wild and wonderful poem by Vikram Seth, The Tale of Melon City. It's this story that kicks off like a classic fairy tale, right? But then it just spirals into this hilarious, brilliant takedown of government, justice, and, well, what happens when people just stop thinking? Right off the bat, the poem makes you ask some pretty big questions. Like, what actually makes a good leader? And maybe more importantly, what happens when the mob, or at least the loudest voices in the crowd, starts calling the shots? Keep these questions in the back of your mind as we take a walk through this very strange city. All right, so let's set the scene. Like any good old-fashioned fable, it all starts with a king and an idea. So you've got this king, and he's described as just and placid. Basically, he's supposed to be fair, super calm. He gets it in his head to build this huge, magnificent arch over the main street. His goal is to edify spectators, which is just a fancy way of saying he wants to build something that'll impress everyone and maybe make them better people. Sounds pretty standard for a king, doesn't it? Well, hold on. The big day comes. He's riding under his brand new arch, and bam, it's too low. Knocks his crown clean off his head. And for this placid king, oh, that's it. It's a total disgrace. All that calm just flies out the window, and he decides someone is going to pay for this. And this, my friends, is where the whole thing just goes completely off the rails. We're launching into this frantic, hilarious blame game. The king wants someone to blame, and he wants it now. So, who's first on the chopping block? The chief of builders. The king doesn't even hesitate, just yells, "Hang him!" But wait, as they're dragging the guy away, he's like, "Hold on, it wasn't me, it was the workmen." The king, wanting to look just, presses pause on the execution. So in come the workmen, and they're totally blindsided. And what's their excuse? "Oh, king, you don't get it. The bricks, they were the wrong size." And just like that, the hot potato of blame gets tossed over to the masons. Next up, the shaking masons. And who do they point at? You guessed it, the architect. The king is like, "Okay, fine. Architect, you're up. To the gallows." But, and this is where it gets really good, the architect is smart. He says, "Your Majesty, you seem to have forgotten something. You made some changes to the plans I showed you." Uh-oh. The blame has literally boomeranged right back to the king. So now the king is sweating. He's totally flustered. He says this is tricky and does what any cornered leader does. He calls for an advisor, the wisest man in the land. So they drag in this guy who's so old he can't even walk or see, and this ancient sage comes up with the most brilliant conclusion: the real culprit was the arch. The arch itself is guilty. So naturally, the arch must be hanged. I'm not making this up. That's what he says. Okay, so we've reached what you might think is peak ridiculousness. But believe me, this story is about to take a turn that is so much sharper, so much more ironic. Meanwhile, while all this deliberation is going on, the crowd is getting antsy. They're muttering. See, they were promised a hanging, and they are not going home disappointed. The king feels this energy, and he starts to get nervous. He realizes, okay, who's actually guilty doesn't matter anymore. The people want a show. The pressure's on. The crowd is getting louder, so the court makes a snap decision. Forget it. Someone, anyone, has to be hanged right now. They get the noose ready, but there's a problem. It's a bit too high. So what do? They start measuring everyone in the city one by one to see who's tall enough to fit the noose. And in the most perfect, ironic twist of fate, only one person fits. You know who it was? It was the king. And so, by his own royal decree, the king was hanged. And here's the kicker, the perfect punchline: the ministers are just relieved. Phew, we found someone to hang, we stopped a riot, and they all shout, "Long live the king! The king is dead." I mean, the dark humor is just incredible. They care more about checking the boxes and keeping things calm than about logic or, their actual king. So the king is dead. The throne is empty. You'd think they'd have some kind of sensible plan for choosing a new leader, right? Yeah, no. These super practical ministers, they go back to the old customs. They announce that the very next person to walk through the city gate gets to pick the new king. Simple as that. So who's the lucky person to wander by? An idiot. Literally, an idiot. The guards stop him and ask the big question, who should be our king? Now you have to understand, This guy has one standard answer for everything. No matter what you ask him, he just says a melon. Why? Because he likes melons. That's it. So the ministers, being the sticklers for the rules that they are, dutifully go and get a melon, carry it to the throne, and crown it the new king. And this is where it all clicks into place. Because this absolutely bonkers story isn't just for a quick laugh. It's an incredibly sharp satire, and it has a lot to say about how we, as people, govern ourselves. When you break it down, this poem is just loaded with themes. You've got the satire of a justice system that's more of a circus than a court. You've got this question about the role of citizens, who seem to want entertainment more than good sense. Then there's the whole danger of blindly following rules without ever asking why. And of course, the huge irony of a supposedly democratic process that ends with a melon on the throne. And Vikram Seth is a master at using literary tools to land his punch. The irony is just dripping from every line. A king orders his own execution, a melon becomes a king. The whole legal mess is a perfect example of satire, just exaggerating things to show how silly they are. And that melon, it's the perfect symbol, isn't it? It represents any leader who's just there. Weak, absurd, basically a placeholder in a position of power. So what about the people? How did they feel about being ruled by a piece of fruit? Well, they're totally fine with it. The poem explains they couldn't care less who's in charge as long as that person, or melon, leaves us in peace and liberty. And this gets at a core idea called laissez-faire, which is French for let it be. It's this policy of non-interference. Think about it. After all the chaos of a king who was very active but made zero sense, maybe a ruler who does nothing at all seems like a pretty good deal. When you get right down to it, the poem is a powerful warning shot. It's a critique of any system, any government, any organization where following the letter of the law becomes more important than just using your brain. And it's about what happens when people get so tired of bad leadership that they just check out, give up their responsibility, and end up with, well, a melon in charge. So that leaves us with a final thought, something to chew on. If you lived in a melon city and your choice was between a leader who causes chaos by trying to do things and a leader who does absolutely nothing at all, which one would you pick?